This will sound very strange, but Harrison Ford starred in the Indiana Jones movie Temple of Doom, in which in the opening scene, Harrison Ford is flying a plane and jumps out of it into India right before the plane crashes into a mountain. And this opening scene in India, in this Indiana Jones movie, is a prophecy from the righteous Christian God of the Bible that is predicting that Kamala Harris, who is of Indian descent, will die in a plane crash on October 17, 2023. The actor Harrison Ford is known for his aviation mishaps. God is using Harrison Ford and his acting career, which is filled with him in roles of a pilot. And he is known for his aviation hobby, and he is a spokesman for the aviation community. And he narrated the IMAX movie Living in the Age of Airplanes. And in terms of prophetic signs, Harrison Ford's aviation mishaps serve as a witness, which is why Harrison Ford was nominated for an Oscar award for his role in the movie Witness, because God has used Harrison Ford as a witness that is pointing to the predicted date that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on October 17, 2023. This includes, for example, a movie named 6 Days, 7 Nights, in which Harrison Ford actually flew the plane. It is actually Harrison Ford flying the plane in the scenes in this movie. The plot of this movie centers around a plane crash, and Harrison Ford's character's name is Harris. This Harrison Ford prophecy is predicting that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, her Air Force Two plane, caused by turbulence, lightning, and a bird strike in St. Louis as she flies across the country on October 17, 2023. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. All right, here we have something truly special. This video is about, first of all, Harrison Ford and how God has used Harrison Ford in his prophetic signs to point to the coming aviation mishap of Kamala Harris. And this is in fact how I first learned that the way in which Barack Obama will become the president again and the Antichrist is through the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is what is hinted at with Harrison Ford, who is infamous for his aviation mishaps. This particular diagram will talk about something amazing as well regarding the temple and how God has used this picture, these connections, these prophetic signs connected to each other to point to the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ and the restoration of the temple in which Jesus will dwell in the 1,000 years of peace in the Messianic age. But I will explain how God pointed to this through Harrison Ford. And here we have the big aviation mishap, if you will. This is the date that he crashed his vintage World War II plane onto the golf course in California. There are a few prophetic significances for this. Okay, so first of all, Harrison Ford, let's just get some basics out of the way. Harrison Ford, his two names are of two presidents, Harrison, President Harrison, and President Ford. President Harrison, Benjamin Harrison, was the presidency that was skipped by the only president to serve non-consecutive terms, President Cleveland, just like how Barack Obama will serve non-consecutive terms. President Ford, Gerald Ford, was the only president to never have been elected vice president or president. He was appointed instead. And this is the reason, and just like how Barack Obama will be appointed instead and thus overcome the 22nd Amendment's restriction on someone being elected to the office more than twice, he will be appointed instead. So Harrison Ford crashed his vintage World War II plane onto the golf course. He had to go to the hospital. He was in rough shape after that. He was very lucky to have survived. Another thing, it was a crash into the 31st state, California. And this is a hint at going down to Egypt. The 31st chapter in the book of Isaiah begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." And then the chapter ends with the defeat of the Antichrist at the arrival of the Messiah at his second coming on the Temple Mount, his defeat. And so we have a temple symbolism in Isaiah chapter 31 too, and the defeat of the Antichrist. So I'm just building the story here as we go. I'm going to get to how Harrison Ford is actually hinting at the Temple Mount and the coming defeat of the Antichrist and the restoration of the temple. And this is why, as I will explain, he crashed onto the tee off for the 8th hole on the golf course. I will explain though. The big number painted on the side of his World War II vintage plane is 50. The date that he crashed was the date 3/5. And as I will explain, this hints at 35. And this is why we have this 3 sets of 3 times 50 weeks until the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Now, why is this important? Well, first of all, 50 weeks is a connection that symbolizes the church. And the main theme of God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is judgment warning for the church, and specifically the American church, and specifically the American evangelical church of Laodicea. Jesus, God, is very displeased with the church. The church of Laodicea, for example, is the church that Jesus wrote to and said that he was not inside it. He was knocking on the outside, wanting to come in. Anyway, I won't get into doctrine here in this video. Make sure that you watch the 23 church signs video on this channel. Arguably the most important video, especially if you are a Christian. And when the prediction comes to pass, of course, you will know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, or at least you should know that, in my opinion. So anyway, the Feast of Pentecost symbolizes the church, and the Feast of Pentecost is literally means 50th day, and the Feast of Pentecost is also known as the Feast of Weeks. Hence why 50 weeks connections are extremely important in God's signs. Also, 3 times 50 weeks hints at 350, and 50 weeks is 350 days. So in other words, we have a triple 50 weeks connection. But not only that, we have a triple 50 weeks connection. But not only that, we have 3 times 50, which also hints at 350. The reason for this massive emphasis of the number 350 that you are looking at, is that God is pointing to the 350th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance, which I will just take a minute to read. Strong's G350 is the word that means examine or judge. To investigate, examine, inquire into, scrutinize, sift, question, specifically in a forensic sense of a judge, to hold an investigation. To interrogate, examine the accused or witnesses. To judge of, estimate, determine, the excellence or defects of any person or thing, as in the church. All right. Further confirmation of what I am saying here, which is that this is all judgment warning for the church. Because really, a lot of Christians have a misunderstanding regarding the purpose of the end times and the Antichrist. They think that it is somehow for the purpose of purging the earth or something to that effect. I will say a couple of things. First, the primary reason for the end times and the Antichrist is, as the Bible says, to test the faith of quote-unquote Christians. God could end the age and take who he wants to heaven and who he doesn't and put them in hell in a day or in a second if he wanted to. So that isn't the primary purpose of the end times and the Antichrist. It is to test the faith of the quote-unquote Christians. Second, Matthew 25 and the parable of the separating of the sheep from the goats and of the nations is not a parable talking about separating unbelievers from believers. It is a judgment warning for the church, quote-unquote Christians. Jesus is speaking to quote-unquote Christians. In context, we know this as well, because the prior two parables are about Christians, the bags of gold and the one Christian that didn't do anything with his bag of gold who was sent to hell, and the 5 out of 10 bridesmaids, which are all representative Christians, that were left behind, from the wedding banquet, etc. This is the misunderstanding regarding Matthew 25 and the parable of the sheep and the goats. And anyway, the point, the origin, the root of all of what I'm getting at is the bad doctrine that says that Christians don't need to do anything. Okay, let's move on. Like I said, we don't want to get too sidetracked onto doctrine here, but of course it really is what it's all about, That's why you need to watch the 23 Church Signs video. Okay, so the root of the bad fruit that's from the bad tree is the bad doctrine. But there's many reasons for that too. But what is further confirmation of what I'm saying is this sign right here, which is this plane crash on the I-35 highway, which is what is hinted at with these 3 sets of 3 times 50, which hints at 3 sets of 35. And this is because the I-35 highway plane crash sign is one of a few I-35 highway signs. Well, there's more than just this one. And it hints at Isaiah chapter 35, in which there is a description of essentially an allusion to the rapture, the evacuation, but also, quote unquote, the highway of holiness, hence the I-35 highway. The 35th president, President Kennedy, was killed in his car as his car was about to drive onto the on-ramp of the I-35 highway. Likewise, Kamala Harris will also die while in office in a vehicle, if you will, in her plane. And it'll be 35 days before it is predicted that Barack Obama will become the president again and the Antichrist. As a result of which, God's faithful will need a rescue onto the highway of holiness that is described in Isaiah chapter 35. But I'll get to this plane crash. But let's get back to Harrison Ford here. It is exactly this plane crash on the date 3/5, which also hints at 35. It is exactly 3 times 50 weeks, which hints at 35. To this prophetic sign right here on the Temple Mount. Now, at first you'll think, well, what does Harrison Ford have to do with the Temple Mount and Jerusalem? Please allow me to explain. First of all, this prophetic sign. This was the day that 42 Jews openly prayed on the Temple Mount. They were being accosted by groups of Muslims, Arab Muslims, and this was an unprecedented event. The 42 Jews began shouting prayers to the Hebrew God of the Bible in violation of the protocol. They are not allowed to do that. It is illegal. Jews, when they are on the Temple Mount, they are not allowed to even say a prayer before drinking a sip of water. And this hadn't happened until this time. But the group of them all together started shouting out prayers to the God of the Bible, 42 of them. And this is extremely prophetic because 42 is the number in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of time of the Antichrist. The Antichrist is to rule the Temple Mount for a symbolic 42 months. However, that 42 months is simply symbolic. And the prediction being made in this video will prove this. I know for a lot of people that will be raising an eyebrow. I understand. But believe me, when the prediction comes to pass, you need to rethink things like I did. I believed also at one time that it was a literal 42 months. It is only symbolic, like a lot of things in the Bible, especially in Bible prophecy. And that 42 months is actually more than symbolic. It did actually begin in May of 2021, but I won't explain that here. Anyway, that's the reason for 42 months. It was also exactly 6 months after the Jews were able to openly pray on the Temple Mount for the first time, after the terrorism on the Temple Mount. And that was exactly 49 biblical years after the decree to rebuild Jerusalem in the Knesset of Israel. And that paralleled the Daniel chapter 9 prophecy with the parallel between Suleiman the Magnificent and on, which I explained in another video, so I won't explain it here. We need to move on anyway, because there's too much to explain in this video. But this is, in other words, what I'm saying is this is an important Temple Mount sign, and in Daniel chapter 9, speaking of which, the prophecy is broken up into a period of 69 and then a 70th period, okay? 70th set of 7 years, followed by the 69 times 7 years. The 70th set of 7 years is the period of the Antichrist and the end times, and that's why God uses connections of 69, a period of time, such as 69 months here, or in other cases, 69 weeks, 69 years, for symbolism for the period of the end times and the Antichrist. And so that is why it is exactly 69 months from this extremely prophetic 42 Jews sign on the Temple Mount to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to her replacement, the Antichrist, who will be on the Temple Mount and then will be defeated on the Temple Mount. Okay? So we have, again, another exact 3 times 50 weeks to this sign right here. Again, this was another plane crash. This was the plane that crashed onto the I-35 highway by the pilot who had competed for America in international aviation competition, which is why he was able to skillfully land his plane onto the highway and survive. And this was the same day as the Rockefeller tree was lit up, on the same day that New York State sky was lit up by the meteor, which was captured also in the viral video from the CN Tower, which is Tower of Babel symbolism. And this is all because this is Antichrist, mark of the Antichrist symbolism, but I've explained it many times in other videos. I'm not going to do it again, I don't think. But Rockefeller is the pioneer of the thing industry and his Rockefeller Institute. They were responsible also for the 50 to 100 million deaths in the thing that happened in 1918. You know what I'm talking about. And the thing is transhumanism, Tower of Babel symbolism, which is why the CN Tower. Okay, let's move on. And this is another 3 times 50 weeks to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash, which will lead to the Antichrist, who will enforce the mark of the Antichrist. Hence this connection. And it is through the mark of the Antichrist that the church will be tested. All right? So that's why this is relevant in all of this. Furthermore, the other I-35 sign was the car pileup in Dallas. And Dallas is the home of evangelicalism. And it happened right in front of a hospital during a shift change. And so most of the few hundred cars that were piled up were hospital workers. And this was right when the thing was being rolled out. And it was a massive judgment sign. The clogging of the transportation artery is symbolism for the clogging of the you-know-what inside people as a result of the thing. Okay? And so that's why it's a judgment warning for the church. It is a spiritual abomination. Many quote-unquote Christians have already taken it because of the doctrine. One reason, the doctrine that they have, which Jesus said he hates in Revelation chapter 2 and is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of this doctrine, which in one example of it is dispensationalism, which says that to them that this thing couldn't possibly be the mark of the Antichrist because all Christians haven't been raptured yet. But believe me, the one reason why they took the thing is because it is judgment for this particular doctrine. And anyway, the commonly held objections that people have to, based on their understanding of Bible prophecy as to why this thing cannot be the mark of the Antichrist, I answer in the snake bite video. Make sure you watch it. But know that when the prediction comes to pass, your interpretations of those understanding of that of those prophecies is incorrect. Case closed. That's the purpose of the prediction from God. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this and these controversial things that I'm saying, including when the second coming is and what the mark of the Antichrist is. Okay? Now, the day that Harrison Ford crashed his plane onto the 8th hole of the golf course was exactly 23 months. Where do we go first? Well, let's go here first. Okay. So this was the Super Bowl 51, which is known as the biggest comeback Super Bowl in history, when Tom Brady and the Patriots came back from a 25-point deficit late in the third quarter. And that is because the 51st president will be Barack Obama, who will make a massive comeback, becoming the 51st president, through the use of the 25th Amendment, which is why the 25-point deficit. And the Patriots, because New England and the Patriots are symbolic of the spiritual founding of America and the relationship that America had from the beginning with God. There have been only two nations in the history of the world that were founded on a relationship with God, Israel and America. The reason for the Falcons, though, well, Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash due to a bird strike, and the Falcons, the Atlanta Falcons, are nicknamed Dirty Birds. Atlanta is named after Atlantis, which is transhumanism symbolism. But Falcons also in this context because Harrison Ford flew the Millennium Falcon in the movie Star Wars. We have the big coincidence regarding Harrison Ford, which is that he starred in all of these roles as a pilot, and he is known for his aviation hobby and aviation mishaps. Anyway, he famously flew the Millennium Falcon, and that's why we have this exact 23 months to the Falcons Super Bowl. Okay, and God pairs 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections, and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist. Because this is how God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. His true big picture, which is only being explained on this channel, which is it works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true, and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way in which he would provide second witnesses for us, if we think about it, is through pairing certain numbers together. Simple way of providing a second witness. And after spending more than full-time hours from morning until night for 6 years, I know the numbers that he pairs together to confirm things. And one such pair is 9 and 23. 23 is the ninth prime number. But the reason, essentially, and I explain it so many times, I could play a 7-minute clip here, but I'm not going to, because I've played this 7-minute clip in many other videos. But the Antichrist became the president in 2009, and the basketball president wore jersey 23 in high school and will become the president again in 2023. And this is why he also pairs 23 and 44 together, because the 44th president wore jersey 23 and will become the president again in 2023. So 9, 23, and 44 are the numbers that God pairs together frequently, okay, all the time. And that's why this Super Bowl was not only 23 months exactly after the Harrison Ford crash, but it was also exactly 9 years after the Super Tuesday tornado outbreak, which was at the time the deadliest tornado outbreak in U.S. history, only surpassed by the other one in 2011 that occurred on the same day that Barack Obama released his birth certificate forgery. But this was the day, the Super Tuesday primaries, in which prior to this he was running neck and neck with Hillary Clinton, but on this day he pulled ahead and went on to win the nomination. So this was the pivotal moment in Barack Obama's rise to the presidency. And that's why we had the deadly tornado outbreak on the day, exactly 9 years before this comeback Super Bowl 51 by 25 points. Well, anyway, this 4 plus 4 days is paired with the 9 years and also the 23 months. And this gets us to this other Harrison Ford aviation mishap on February 13th, 2017, which is exactly 23 months and 9 days after this aviation mishap, another pairing of 9 and 23. God also pairs 9 and 110 together. But this isn't really actually a pairing of 9 and 110 because it's 23 months and 9 days. Anyway, sorry. But this was the day that he flew his airplane over a passenger commercial jet on the taxiway, on the runway, which had 110 passengers in it. And he flew it accidentally, just 20 feet above it, coming in for a landing on the wrong place of the airport. And also, this was 110 days before Pentecost, which is symbolic of the church. Okay. And furthermore, the walls of security collapsed on Jericho on Pentecost. I know that's not in the text, but God has demonstrated that through his signs. And actually, if you do read the text, you can see that it is a parallel with the timing of events in the Omer count, from Passover to Pentecost. Okay. However, I need to explain that, and I do explain it in other videos. It is amazing. But anyway, Joshua died at the age of 110, and so that's why the 110 days from the 110 passengers to Pentecost. All right. Now, this was at the same time that this Arch of Palmyra from the Temple of Baal that was destroyed by ISIS in Palmyra, Syria, the replica of it made by I think it was the MIT students that did this, and they unveiled it at the World Government Summit in Dubai, which is Antichrist symbolism. Furthermore, it's the Temple of Baal we were talking about, which is Antichrist symbolism in the Bible. Okay, we're talking about the seed of Satan sort of thing. It's not the seed of Satan that Jesus talked about in the book of Revelation precisely, but the Temple of Baal is synonymous with the sacrifice that the pagans and Jews would do of their babies on the fire of the altar of the god, Baal. This is extreme, this unveiling of this Arch of Palmyra from the Temple of Baal at the World Government Summit at the same time as this Harrison Ford aviation mishap. Well, anyway, this aviation mishap and the timing of it with the unveiling of this temple sign, Temple of Baal sign, is astounding because it is exactly 400 weeks before the second coming, on the Day of Atonement on October 12th, 2024. And again, the prediction in this video will prove it. And again, this is the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction, is to confirm for you that this is, without a doubt, case closed, the day of the second coming. Because this, what I'm talking about here, is an interconnected web of signs, and the center of the web is the Day of Atonement. In other words, there's no way I could possibly predict this plane crash of Kamala Harris if it weren't true that the second coming is on this day. In a nutshell. Okay, long story short. But anyway, again, I know far better than you why God has given me a voice through this prediction, and it is to prove these controversial things. But this exact 400 weeks, because the Antichrist is symbolized by Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, and the Israelites escaped Pharaoh in Egypt after 400 years of affliction in their exodus. And the exodus is also symbolic, if you will, a metaphor for the rapture from the Antichrist. Anyway, that's the reason for the exact 400 weeks, because it's a period of time involving 400, and we have a 400 years in the Bible regarding the person that symbolizes the Antichrist. Also, and here is now what I was getting at originally, why it is that this plane crash is Temple Mount symbolism. It is because from this Harrison Ford aviation mishap with the Temple of Baal sign, it is exactly 4 + 4 biblical years. So a biblical year, a prophetic biblical year, is a 12-month year made of 30 days each. Up until a certain point in history, all ancient cultures used 360-day calendar years. Okay, and so 4 + 4 biblical years exactly is paired with, confirmed with these connections here, which I haven't even gotten to yet, all of them. But this 4 + 4 days connection, for example, from this Falcons Super Bowl which is confirmed with this 23 months connection, which pairs with the 4 + 4 days connection, which then pairs with the 4 + 4 biblical years. All right. Furthermore, we have these 4 combinations of force connections, which also confirm the 4 + 4 biblical years from this Harrison Ford aviation mishap. So we have that going too here, which I'll get to. But this 4 + 4 biblical years is also 8 biblical years. And it gets us to Hanukkah Day 8 in 2025, January 2nd. This will be after the second coming, and Hanukkah is the festival that commemorates the restoration of the temple. After Jesus arrives and defeats the Antichrist, there will be a restoration of the temple on the Temple Mount. And the festival of Hanukkah will, if you will, be a symbolic beginning of the new age, the Messianic age, of the restored temple where Jesus will dwell inside, symbolizing man's reunification with God. Now, that's why Hanukkah Day 8, because the Hanukkah festival is 8 days long. In other words, it's the last day of Hanukkah, and it is exactly 8 biblical years after Harrison Ford's aviation mishap, which connects with Harrison Ford's plane crash onto the 8th hole of the golf course. But not only was it the 8th hole, it was the beginning of the 8th hole. It was where they tee off on the 8th hole, which was symbolism for the beginning of the Messianic age after day 8 of Hanukkah. But not only this, the king in the Bible, in ancient Israel, that symbolizes the restoration of the temple is King Josiah. And he restored the temple at the age of 8. He was 8 years old. And that's why we have this exact 8 biblical years connection to the restoration of the temple on Hanukkah day 8, which was alluded to with Harrison Ford's crash onto the 8th hole of the golf course. It's amazing. Okay, now this 40 plus 40 months and 4 days is obviously confirmed with the second witness of this 4 plus 4 days. This gets us to Kamala Harris's plane crash. So Harrison Ford's aviation mishap connects directly with 40 plus 40 months and 4 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. So we have 2 ways in which the Harrison Ford aviation mishap connects. Well, actually 3 if you include the 69 months, and actually 4 if you include this trail here. There's many ways, in fact, that the Harrison Ford 8th hole golf course crash connects with the predicted crash of Harris on October 17th, 2023. Okay, well, this is another way. We have another way right here, because from this aviation mishap in 2017 as well, it is 44 months and 4 days to this event right here, which was known ahead of time. I knew that there would be an explosion on this date. Before this time, I wasn't putting the pieces together, and I didn't realize that God was using Harrison Ford to point to the plane crash of Kamala Harris. It was after this that I realized this. However, before this, I knew that God was pointing to this date with explosion signs, and many of the connections were coming from other Harrison Ford signs, which is why it was astounding that we had an explosion in Harrisonburg, Virginia. It was a national news story. I actually thought that this was going to be the end of the trail for the signs that God is providing, pointing to an explosion in New York City. And this connection right here is actually not one of the connections that I knew ahead of time. I only discovered this in the last couple of weeks, putting this diagram together, getting more into things, looking more deeply. But there were other connections which I'll explain in another video. I'll make another video explaining the connections that I knew ahead of time to the Harrisonburg, Virginia explosion. But anyway, it was an explosion at the finish line of a marathon, and 3 people were injured. And it was exactly 90 months after the explosion in West Texas, which coincided with the explosion at the finish line of the Boston Marathon that killed 3 people. Okay, and the 3 injured here were James Madison University students, and James Madison wrote the Constitution, and the Antichrist will do away with the Constitution. This connection right here, 3 years, is confirmed with the 3 injured. Okay, and 3 years is also 36 months, and God uses the number 36 as symbolism for the Antichrist, or rather, 666, because 36 hints at 3 sixes. And also 36 is 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. Also, King Ahab, after he repented, God gave 3 years of grace to the northern kingdom of Israel before its destruction. And exactly 3 years to the minute after Bill Clinton repented live on television with a pastor was the minute that the last building collapsed on 9/11. All right, so I think I've explained this entire diagram now. We got to the main point here, which was how God is pointing to the second coming through Harrison Ford's plane crash. This is an amazing diagram. Again, he crashed on the date 3/5, and we have these three sets of 3 times 50 weeks to the date it is predicted she will crash, connecting through this temple sign. Again, Temple Mount connection up here, right? And also the I-35 plane crash. It's amazing. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel. And do it now in case you aren't able to later.